Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. First of all, I would like to invite you, you don't have to use the Slido yet, but just to memorize, to bring back to your mind a situation in your life when you felt socially excluded. In that moment, if someone would have been able to scan your brain, we would have witnessed similar neural correlates than in physical pain. So rejection really does hurt, and that's important to us as human connection. And the next task for you is, now you can use the Slido. I have prepared a couple of statements to you, and now you can ponder and reflect on them and think about how much you either disagree or agree with them. So take a moment to look at the Slido. I will make some notes. Okay. Well, this is interesting. I will get back to the analysis during the presentation. Perhaps we can take the second question. Okay. I'm doing rapid statistical analysis here. Okay, then perhaps the final and the third question I have to you. Okay. Thank you very much for your replies. I will get back to them during the presentation. Perhaps we can put the slides on now. Thanks. So once again, to recap what I mentioned earlier in the beginning, rejection indeed does hurt, and that points to the importance of human connection, also to our physical health. I will start talking about compassion. It is a phenomenon of human connection, and phenomenon which I have studied in compassion research group at the University of Helsinki. And it is a phenomenon which, it's a word we use daily. So I think we all have different understandings what compassion actually is, and that's quite okay. But if we want to get sort of a research-based definition of compassion, here is one. So what is compassion? Instead of being, for example, a personality trait that someone has and some other person does not have, compassion actually is an intersubjective process between two or more people. It comprises of 3 phases. The first step of compassion is noticing. Do I notice the suffering, the pain, the anxiety of the other? Do I notice? And the second step is feeling. Does it evoke any feelings in me? Do I feel empathy towards that other person? And for us, me and my colleagues who have been studying compassion, it has been quite a surprise that actually in business contexts, empathy has been the booming word. Because according to this definition, compassion actually is much more hardcore than empathy. Because compassion actually, besides these empathetic reactions, includes the actions we take to alleviate the other's suffering. And this process is framed by something researchers call meaning making. So interpretations about who is worth of my help and how I should engage in helping behavior. What should I do to alleviate the pain? And this sort of dynamic intersubjective process is one possible definition for compassion. And also, we have in our research group started to talk also about co-passion, so in Finnish myötäinto, which for a critical moral philosopher such as me sounded a little bit ridiculous in the beginning, but actually when you think about that, co-passion, myötäinto, or the lack of it, is as crucial as compassion. If, for instance, in your organization, at your workplace, you are enthusiastic or joyful, or you have succeeded in an important project and then you're happy about it, and no one responds to your joy, that's really painful. It sort of depicts lack of appreciation. So even critical moral philosophers have to admit that the crucial point is actually the synergy of these two phenomena. If my colleagues do not respond to my joy or enthusiasm, can I really expect that they would help me when I suffer or when I'm in pain? So we need both of these, both two. But when me and my colleague, co-founder of CoHumans company, Professor Anne-Birgitta Pessi, we have developed these interventions on compassion, and we have trained organizations. It has become evident that compassion evokes reactions. Some people embrace it. Some people think that, oh yay, this is something that is lacking from the working life. But some others challenge us with harsh criticism or even a little bit poignant criticism. So we have started to bust some compassion myths, even though we don't have as fancy hats as those guys, but still. So first myth I'm presenting to you now is what we often hear, what the question which is often presented to us. Like, well, this compassion thing, it is nice, but isn't it really so that fundamentally, deep down, all of us humans are malicious and self-interested? Well, this necessarily is not the case. Empirical research during last couple of decades has very much suggested or confirmed the idea that actually pro-sociality, wanting to help the others, is vital. It's It's sort of fundamental human need, as fundamental as self-interest. Already little children, before they even speak or know how to behave in social context, they already show some pro-social behavior. And furthermore, compassion is really embodied, and that also tells about how important it is to us. Eating chocolate and helping others makes the same hormones run in our body. And also, from my perspective as a philosopher or even as a theologian, which I am, I would say that even though we have a horrific tendency to do bad things to each other, we are all also capable of doing good in a really revolutionary way. And the question is, which side of humanity do we want to foster and cherish? The next myth, this is also very common. Why are you talking about compassion in organizations, especially in business organizations? It's a little bit fluffy, pink, feminine, like cotton candy. But then again, is it really? Is it really? Human life we always have in our life suffering, pain, anxiety. And that is why we need compassion. Is that fluffy and cute? Is suffering really something pink? And then, from business perspective, compassion in organization has been studied most of all in the United States, but also nowadays in Europe. It has been studied for a couple of decades now already. And, well, the business case of compassion is quite strong, in fact. Individual level, we know that compassion, even small, brief micro-encounters with people we don't know, even those micro-encounters promote our cognitive capabilities. Compassion is connected in research to better work recovery and the better quality of sleep. And perhaps not surprisingly, compassion increases the amount and quality of our social connections. And if we think about organizations as communities of people, compassion creates safe environments in which innovations can start to grow. Work engagement, commitment to employer, they are also higher in cultures of compassion. And finally, compassion facilitates the sort of the flow of information in organizations between people. And that, in turn, makes it easier to adapt to the changing working environments. So I think that many HR developers or many CEOs would like to see those phenomena in their own organizations. And the third myth is, well, compassion. This is self-evident. We all know that we have to be compassionate. And in a sense, this myth is true. Because all important things in life, wisdom, love, courage, care, we all know that we have to cherish them and promote them. But yet, it is so difficult. We all fail when it comes to these fundamental phenomena of human life. And actually, I'm a little bit worried that there is something that I would like to call human connection deficit in Finnish working life and perhaps in Western working life as well. 2/3 of Finns have witnessed bullying at work. 1/5 of Finns experience the sense of community basically never in their organizations. 1/3 doesn't trust their supervisors. And on European level, in European surveys, we see that quarter of Europeans feel that their work has a negative effect on their health. And all this has its consequences. According to one estimate, supervisors use 7 weeks per year to mitigate the consequences of their subordinates' uncivil behavior. So in an organization with, let's say, 15 supervisors or leaders, that would equal 200,000 euros worth of supervisors' time just because people are rude to each other. And furthermore, we see an increase in the amount of sick leave days in Finland. It's really alarming. And of course, there are many reasons behind that development, but perhaps poor leadership and the lack of human connection is not the least of them. So, despite its soft reputation, compassion actually is quite vital also to business organizations. So the next evident question is how to get more of it then? Well, at least not by telling people to be more compassionate. The thing is that we already are compassionate. The crucial question is, what is wrong with working life if we as human beings cannot be what we are at our best? Caring, compassionate, moral, meaning-seeking creatures. So what is wrong? And actually, one of the barriers of compassion is what research calls fear of compassion. For most of us, in most contexts, compassion is soothing and calming and evokes positive emotions. But then in other contexts, like at work, we feel that compassion is threatening. It might be threatening to our professional identity or our idea of our status in the working community. And actually, your response depicted a quite high level of this fear of compassion. But don't worry, my colleagues' research actually shows that compassion interventions reduce this fear of compassion. We in CoHumans approach compassion or increasing compassion through 3 pathways or 3 lenses. First one is skills. Compassion skills or skills that support compassion. Emotional skills, communication skills, perspective taking and empathy. But the problem is that most of the solutions of humane working life stop here. And it doesn't work. If the root cause of the lack of human connection is, for example, an intolerable workload, it cannot be solved by introducing mindfulness training to individuals. It sort of transfers the problem from the organization to the individuals. So it doesn't work and it's unethical. So we have to also focus on structures that support compassion. Do we have sort of physical spaces where people can meet each other? What is our internal communication like? Is it transparent? Is it accessible? These kind of things. And thirdly, we can focus on the culture of compassion. What kind of traditions we have? Are they inclusive? Are they open to everyone? Do we have traditions where we could celebrate? So enact compassion, myötäinto, together. We are currently doing exactly this in the yet largest projects to promote compassionate working culture in Hyrja Education. It's a vocational educational institution of 500 employees. And asked for the final results next autumn. But at the moment, actually, the project has confirmed what we already presumed. Finnish organizational compassion is not grand or festive, but it's about small, everyday communication situations. Who do we greet at workplaces? How do we respond to emails? Do we respond at all to them? And most of the how compassion is apparent in Finnish working life centers around drinking coffee together. So I think that's also very, very Finnish. Oh, oops, I have two versions of the same slide. Perhaps this was enough. But if we talk about compassion in healthcare organizations, it's perhaps not a surprise that it has been studied. Compassion has been studied a lot in healthcare organizations. In a way, healthcare is about preventing suffering or alleviating suffering, and in that sense, compassion is at the core. And at its best, compassion is a great resource to healthcare providers and to patients alike. Research shows that, for example, in a hospital setting, compassionate working environment mitigates the harmful physiological reactions regarding stress. And when it comes to patients, some studies suggest that in hospitals with compassionate cultures, patients' experience of pain patients experience less pain. But then compassion also has its dark side or challenge, to say the least. Healthcare providers, in order to be compassionate, they do a lot of emotional labor. And it's a form of strain we often forget to think about. And I think that many healthcare providers, many people who work in healthcare organizations are in the risk of developing what research knows as compassion fatigue, which is somewhat related to burnout. It's a little bit different, but quite similar phenomenon. And it may result I lost my thought. It may result in incapacity to work. Sorry for stumbling. So, in this sense, compassion in healthcare is both a great resource, but then also it has its limitations. But now digitalization, as you very well know, is changing the scene regarding compassion and human connection in healthcare. The reactions seem to be a little bit divided again. Some people greet the opportunities of new technologies with uncritical enthusiasm. And then there are others who fear that digitalization will take the care out of healthcare, and who see that the robotic baby seal is sort of the first sign of the destruction that lies ahead along with this technological development. I, for one, see great promise in technological development, but of course, it hinges on a couple of fundamental or critical points. I will bring out a couple here. A lot of responsibility along with the technological development. A lot of responsibility goes to those who develop the new technologies and the new services and the new products. And the fundamental question, I think, is that what is the fundamental design driver of health tech? Is it profitability, or is it what is intriguing to tech experts? Or is it what actually humans need? And interesting suggestion comes from recent discussion around the workload of nurses. This former nurse, Tanja Seppänen, told in Helsingin Sanomat that she doesn't want to work as a nurse anymore because the ethical burden or the ethical strain is intolerable. It affects negatively friendships, family, even spare time, leisure, recovery. And the reason behind this is that actually the nurses' time goes to reporting and to monitoring and not to the actual care. They would want to do their work in an ethically sustainable manner, but at the present situation, they are not able to do it. And I really must thank nurses for bringing up the issue, because I think this is more widely shared. Actually, your responses to the question on the moral values and whether you can follow your moral values in your work were quite positive, and I'm really happy for you that you are able to align your personal values and the values of the organization. But this is not the case with everyone. And actually, I would like to say that ethical controversies, the ethical strain, is at the moment the most ignored threat to well-being at work. These are just some examples of the effects of experiences of unjust or just leadership. Injustice correlates with, for example, metabolic disorders, especially in male population, reduced cognitive capabilities, and increased alcohol abuse, whereas justice in leadership correlates with reduced work absenteeism, for example. So perhaps this might be a design driver for the health tech community to ease the ethical strain of nurses. And if we are able to really dig deep into the fundamental design drivers, I think there lies the promise for human connection, digitalization, new technologies. And if we dig even deeper, the junction of human connection, new technologies, and healthcare, it really leads us to ask the big questions. It makes us all philosophers of human connection. In order to find an answer to the question of whether robots can be integrated in caring work, we have to answer so many questions that are really fundamental, really philosophical. What are emotions? What is intersubjectivity? How is or what is authenticity in care? How is trust created in care settings? And furthermore, we also have to look at the ethical implications of integrating robotics to care. And I think that what I want to point out has already been implied in my presentation here. In healthcare, empathy and compassion fall short without justice and equality. This is true for all organizations, but it's especially true for healthcare organizations. I think there are many people here who work for the public sector institutions and really know how painful it sometimes is to balance the human need for connection and the ethical imperative to sort of cut the cake evenly. So, balancing compassion and justice in healthcare organization, it's a difficult task to do. But in order to succeed in that, I think we have to develop our ethical capability as individuals. Not only as consumers, we're really talking a lot about our ethical capabilities as consumers, but our ethical capabilities as workers, as employees in healthcare organizations. And their organizations can either create or destruct the preconditions. Just briefly, how can we get towards ethical healthcare organizations? The first suggestion doesn't cost anything, and we can implement it today. We have already integrated the vocabularies of empathy, of emotional skills, of internal motivation to our analysis of working life. Now we could integrate the vocabulary of right and wrong, of moral agency, of ethics to our analysis of what's going on in our workplaces. There are training and tools that really help organizations develop their ethical capability. There are tools developed by me or other philosophers, as here Øyvind Kvalnes, a Norwegian philosopher, to help making decisions in really difficult ethical situations where actually most often we have to make the choice between options that are bad in different ways. And then thirdly, we have to integrate ethics to service design processes, right from the scratch of the processes. And finally, we have to design for ethical culture in organization. We have to make sure that every HR practice, every leadership practice, every tradition, every structure we have promote ethics and not hinder it. And I started with telling you or providing an example what compassion might be. Discussing what ethics is too big task for this presentation, but I want to leave you with this thought from a French philosopher, Paul Ricoeur. His idea is that the ethical aim of life is to live good life with and for the others in just institutions. So again, that's important is human connection to us. Thank you for your attention and come talk to me. Thanks.